Thank you for having me. Thank you for the opportunity as well to share this. I'll be very brief because I know that we have more things to talk about, more things to do, more important conversations to have. So I'll tell you very briefly about me and my team. So I lead a wonderful, wonderful team in Camden Council. Camden Council is effectively the London Borough of Camden. It's basically part of the larger Greater London, and in Camden, basically, as an area, you may remember kind of Camden Market, a bit of like the punk places, colorful streets, etc. But the place is far more than that. It's 400,000 people just in the borough alone. We have 33,000 council homes within that we are a landlord for. We also have to run adult social care services, children's services, just to give you kind of an idea, particularly for those that are not from the UK, of the scale of it. So when we talk about national policy, at a local level, is a massive undertaking. So we're not just here to deliver services, but we need to kind of think about the national policy and think about also what it would look like for implementation in a place like Camden, right? With the diversity that includes, with the communities that it has. It's a lot, and I am incredibly grateful for the team and for the opportunity that we have within Camden to be able to talk about policy design and service design when there is so much to do and everything feels really urgent. So at a national level, of course, you know, the UK will set out through Parliament, and as you can imagine, laws, big programs, big also kind of funding allocations. But actually at a local level, there is a lot of opportunity as well and a lot of discretion to implement and to think about new things to do. Right? So I'll give an example, the welfare system. Of course, the welfare system in different countries will look differently. We have the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, sets out also kind of how people will receive benefits and may need it depending on kind of like in-work benefits or not, or kind of disability payments, etc. But a lot of that also gets enacted at a local level. So within Camden, we will have teams that not only kind of distribute those funds, but can also think about other ways in which we can think that level of implementation within Camden. And Camden, it's a fantastic place as well, where there is a lot of like progressiveness. So Camden thinks about itself as a kind of having a rebellious spirit, and it does come through in many of the things that we do. So the example I wanted to bring, and it's a beautiful example, and I love when things come together, because even though I did agree to this very late last night, throughout the conversations that we have had thus far, I can see kind of a little thread that I want to come to a close, to bring to a close for you with an example at a local level. So I want to talk about universal basic services. So, of course, within the welfare system, as you can imagine, in different countries will look differently as well. There is a lot of kind of like ideas around how we might do it, depending on need and levels of assessment. And it can also feel very punitive for people, for communities. And we can all agree that, you know, the welfare system in different places is not living up to the challenges of the 21st century, and communities and people will have different needs that look differently now. And with that in mind, of course, we're thinking about enacting and kind of enforcing the implementation of that policy, but also Camden is thinking about the next step. And universal basic services is, of course, you know, it's at an academic level. It's something that has been written about, it's been discussed, and we're using as a framework the something developed kind of in UCL, the Institute for Prosperity. Forgot the name. This is what happens when one doesn't prepare. The Institute of Global Prosperity. Thank you for that. The model is basically 7 areas where, you know, the premise being, if people had access to this basic kind of universal offer, that will kind of make communities, people feel more included to their area, that will kind of serve as a basic offer that can help unlock also kind of opportunities into work, access to communities, access to active economic participation. Some of those 7 areas are, for example, digital inclusion, access, food security, childcare, education, access to transport. And some of that, of course, is already covered by the welfare system. So, for example, access to education for children. So, you have some level of childcare cover, but also school. But there are other areas where perhaps Camden as a local area could enact a new policy, think about what we might do at a local level if we have that discretion. So bringing us back to what we heard earlier around the strands of generative, responsive, and what was the other one?
Practical.
And practical. I would say that whilst at a EU level, that generative space is kind of where you're working and you want to move into the responsive and the practical, you mentioned, right? I would say that we're moving almost kind of on the other way. So we have to be incredibly practical. And a lot of the policy and service design that we do is thinking of the today. But actually, we want to also move into the generative. And how we haven't lost our mind is, beyond, I don't understand. But effectively, we're always living in the now, in the today, but also in the future, and as well as being reactive and also active. And I don't know if we have it in the slide, but I wanted to share with you a model that is not too dissimilar from what David was sharing earlier, except that I just dumb it down to an elephant, just to give you a sense of like the different, the quadrants where different kind of policy ideas and different types of service design and the work that we do. We try to locate it in order to help us make decisions, not only about design, but also around implementation, because we need to think about, in practical terms, what it means for communities today. So I wanted to share with you a couple of, 3 reflections, basically, that I just had as I was preparing for this 5 minutes ago. The universal basic service thinking and what we're developing as a small area of experimentation for us sits in the kind of the next enactive. We're thinking about the next level of policy agenda. But equally, the team, and in partnership with kind of the benefits team, et cetera, we also have to be now and reactive. So for example, one of the policies that we also had to help design was during the, after the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, like of course things got out of control economically, and the council needed to think about how to help kind of families that were actually struggling with access to benefits or other stuff. There was a grant called cost of living grant. So the design of that policy is very much in the now and the reactive. But thinking about the universal basic service, what would that look like, could be seen in the active and next. And with that, we need to think about kind of 3 areas or something that kind of we bring to mind every time we're thinking about this. And it's the different type of methodologies, frameworks that we need to use if we situate ourselves in different areas of the quadrant. So to your point earlier around involving communities and how we might do that in an ethical way. So helping, like thinking about the active and the next gives us a sense of the future, allows us to plan a bit more. So for example, thinking about how we strengthen the community research team, peer researchers, people that can build relationships for in the long term, can help us basically do that with communities, bring the voices of communities in a sustainable way, and also be mindful of like the ethical constraints that we may encounter for a policy that is, or for even a small experiment such as what it would look like if we were to deliver universal basic services in a local area. So those are the sort of things, that sort of decisions that we can make at a practical level if we start planning our work kind of for the future. The other thing that I was reflecting on is our roles as policy designers and design researchers and service designers in setting the standards and not letting the pendulum get people into the kind of like what I'm used to do. So if we're able to demonstrate with the methodology that we have and on the way of working and by engaging communities in a very ethical and sustainable way, we basically set the standard and say, in the future, whatever policy ideas you may have, I know you're in a rush, but this is kind of the standard we need to follow, and it's our responsibility to help them keep that up and be supportive and set examples, but also develop tools, assets, anything that will facilitate that, so people don't go back to like, okay, I've done my Word document again, and this is kind of what I know how to do. I'm not going to change my ways. And the third thing that I thought would be important to reflect on is how the importance of the feedback loop. So, of course, now we engage with communities. We have, as you can imagine, a very politically minded. What I want to say is that, of course, at a local level, the politics of the day-to-day feel really real. And you have councillors who, of course, are elected by the residents, and you have people that are at your doorstep with needs. So the voices of communities, the voices of people are right there day to day, reminding us of what is important and keeping that feedback loop into what it will look like for us, imagining the policy in the future, is something that we have had to develop over time, develop kind of the way in which we can do that sustainably and make sure that that feeds into the policy making and the ideas that we may have for the future. So what we're doing now is kind of designing a small scale experimentation. I mean, some of that is public because all of this is written in our Change by Design blog. Check it out on Medium. So we share some of our work there, but effectively what we're trying to do is ethically and with intention, try to see what it would look like, say, for example, in a council estate area, and what will be the impact in families and communities there, but also how would that sustainably look like if we were to, say, for example, finish a program over time? Because once you have created an expectation from people, we have to be mindful of how we deliver otherwise. And all of that information, thinking about the macro level, going back to the generative, of course, Camden is in a privileged position because we have a lot of opportunity to influence national policymaking through examples, through, working with think tanks and so on. So our responsibility as well is not only bringing the voices of community into the feedback of what we do, but also bringing up to the national level with the kind of channels that we have. This is what I want to share with you today. Thank you so much for having me.